Thanks for coming. This is our November Talking Green. My name is Sarah Jones with the Yampa Valley Sustainability Council. So obviously the interest in tiny homes is real. So this is great, a great turnout. We can get more chairs if we need them. So just let us know. There is one more up here as well. So thank you. Before we go into our tiny home discussion, I first want to talk a little bit about YVSC as an organization and our 2018 Talking Green schedule. For those of you who do not know, the Yampa Valley Sustainability Council, our mission is to be a resource and catalyst to build a sustainable Northwest Colorado. And we do this through about 6 or 7 on-the-ground programmings from energy efficiency, waste diversion, sustainable schools, green building, helping educate the building community on building sustainably, and Talking Green, which is our adult education series. We are a 501c3, and our programming is brought to you by many of our sponsors, grants, and of course direct public support. So for tonight, I just wanted to mention our sponsors, Creekside and HomeLink Magazine, as well as Mountain Window and Door, Zola Window, Fair and Square Construction, Workshop L, Stemo Architectural Associates, Apex Architecture, Purebelt, and Control Designer. Those are sponsors for both our Talking Green and our Green Building program. In 2018, I just want to kind of give you an update on where we are going with 2018. We've already started to plan for our Talking Green events in 2018. We're really excited about the theme this year. This year, we are going to be really focused on climate change and talking about those. We have 4 speakers who are coming that we're very excited about. We have Scott Denning, who's a professor at CSU, and he's going to be talking about climate science. And then we also are working with speakers from Protect Our Winter, Climate Reality Project, and Rocky Mountain Institute. So we think it's going to be a really great lecture series, a focus on science, impacts, action, and resilience. We'll fill in the rest of our year. We'll have 3 tours this year as well. We have our garden tour, our sustainable homes tour, and then we will be doing a tour of the Milner Twin Enviro, the Milner landfill, and MRF. And then other events that we have for our Talking Green in 2018, we will have Inconvenient Sequel on either January 8th or 9th. Stay tuned on that. We have nailed down that date. And Wasted, which is a movie on food waste, in February 8th. So we're really excited. We will have all the details at the very beginning of January. So you can look to our website. If you've signed up or if you are on our listserv, we will provide monthly newsletters with information. And then, as I mentioned, we are a 501c3, and of course, our programs are possible with direct public support. So I want to remind everybody that Colorado Gives Day is December 5th, and we are on the Colorado Gives or Yampa Valley Gives website. So take a look at us there. Okay, so moving on to tiny homes. This is the second in a series we have done on tiny homes. Obviously, as I said, the interest is huge in our area, but the question is, so why is the Sustainability Council taking this on as one of our Talking Green topics? We are interested in tiny homes because really they are a sustainable alternative to housing in our area. They provide both affordable housing and a smaller carbon footprint. They are affordable not only because of their size and therefore the cost to build is less, but also because their long-term cost to operate. As part of our energy program, we do quite a bit of energy efficiency retrofits, and not surprisingly, many of those are in trailer parks. Trailer homes make up a majority of those that we work on, and we see what the cost is to operate a trailer home long term. It's very expensive. They are very inefficient. So we think that tiny homes provide a great alternative for affordable housing. They also have that flexibility. We see, for example, for Aspen Skiing Company, the flexibility of workforce or seasonal housing, and tiny homes provide a great alternative to that as well. And obviously, because of their smaller size and energy use, they provide a smaller carbon footprint. So from that, all three of those perspectives, they're quite sustainable. We see the tiny home movement is growing around the country and the state. There are already 10 to 20 tiny home building companies in the state and proposing developments in Walsenburg, Salida, and Yampa. Because of this growing interest and the sustainable nature of their design, this is the second Talking Green on tiny homes. And we are also really want to engage the community in discussion. You did see a sign up for, we are looking to kind of start a working group to work with city and county, local partners to kind of keep moving the tiny home movement forward. And so that's what we're hoping to do in Route County. So I'm going to turn it over to Susie, who's going to give us kind of a little bit of a background and introduce our speakers. Susie.
So I'm Susie Romig. I work part-time for YVSC in green building and energy efficiency. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about tonight's agenda, and thank you all for coming. And if there's any spaces, there's a chair up here. Anybody want to sit down? If there's any other spaces, just raise your hand. Let some of these guys come sit down. Wow! Standing room only. Woohoo! So our first title for tonight was How to Make Your Tiny Home Legal, What You Need to Know. And that's what these guys are here to talk about. Our plan for this evening is about a 45-minute panel discussion where each speaker will give a summary overview for about 10 minutes. And then Sarah and I are going to facilitate questions and answers, because obviously you guys are probably here because you got some questions, and these guys are going to give the answers. I also in the audience, if Michael will raise your hand. Where'd you go, Michael? Michael back there? Michael is a regional rep for the American Tiny House Association, Michael Pacino, and you live in Steamboat, and he covers Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, and Colorado. So we're going to bring him up here too for the panel later tonight, after the panelists speak. So I'm going to introduce each one of these speakers tonight. Chad, raise your hand. Chad Phillips. He's going to discuss the impacts of zoning regulations that zoning regulations have on the placement of tiny homes in unincorporated Routt County, including current county camping and short-term rental regulations, and what could be in store for the future of tiny homes in Routt County. That's where you guys come in. Second, Todd, relatively new to our community. How many months now?
July 18th.
All right. Todd Carr is the regional building official. He's going to be discussing a newly approved Appendix Q. We'll just leave you wanting for that one, which is going to explain, that's going to be adopted on January 1st in unincorporated Routt County, Oak Creek, and Yampa. And Appendix Q defines a tiny home as 400 square feet or less, correct?
Correct.
But in Oak Creek, yes, unless you're in Oak Creek, they just passed an amendment to increase that definition to 500 square feet or less. We were going to have Scott Kalman here tonight. He's an environmental health director. Unfortunately, he's sick, maybe one too many inspections. So Sarah, she's going to step in and read a little part from Scott. I also have a little handout from Water Resources. It's pretty technical, so if anyone is really interested in water rights for a tiny home, come to me. I'll have a little handout for you. And then Darren and Ryan, raise your hands there, Darren and Ryan. They have an exciting company called Smart Pads, and it's they do have a tiny home product, and they're going to be telling you about also a financing product. So as you can see, all these pictures of various different tiny homes. The term is kind of being focused. It's been battered around a lot, but now I see it as a self-contained home between 100 and 400 square feet. The emerging tiny home movement goes against the trend of increasing house sizes in America. In 1950, the average home size was 983 square feet. By 1973, it increased to 1625 square feet. By 2015, it reached a high of 2,687 square feet for the average American single-family home. According to the Steamboat Springs Board of Realtors, the largest single-family home in Steamboat is 13,296 square feet. You may have noticed that one. It was built in 2009 across the highway from Haymaker Golf Course. That's a single-family home. largest in Steamboat. So there's tiny houses on foundations, and there's tiny houses on wheels, which they call movable tiny homes. And they're different from a trailer, because a trailer, as Sarah explained, is not as energy efficient. And they're different from a RV because that's not meant to be lived in year-round. It's a road warrior. But tiny homes face hurdles in Colorado due to subdivision and HOA covenants or house size minimums. For example, I think these guys are making some headway in Hayden, but in the town of Hayden, the residential low-density neighborhoods require a house minimum size of 800 square feet. But these intrepid developers are working in the high-density neighborhoods, correct?
It's, they've got to be townhomes. The townhome doesn't have a definition of square footage.
And also there's some smaller
They do for
lots.
single family, but not for townhomes, so we have to put them together.
So we're going to have you guys explain that here in just a minute. There's also a new organization called NOAA, National Organization of Alternative Housing, where you can have your tiny homes on wheels voluntarily certified. It's a $500 fee, and that's a trade association that was established in 2015. So there's been a lot of changes in tiny homes, and we're going to kick off tonight with Chad. And if Sarah wants to come up here and run the computer for Chad, or do you want to advance your own? Okay, Sarah will pull it up. Thanks, guys.
Good seats. All right. Sarah, Susie, thanks for inviting me to come down to speak. Again, I'm Chad Phillips, the Director of the Routt County Planning Department. And I, like the rest of my staff, I don't know if we'd say tiny home enthusiasts, but basically the planning staff is supporters of tiny homes. We just haven't really seen much of anything in the county yet. The issue kind of came up early on. We were discussing our camping regulations and how tiny homes kind of fit into that. You know, we kind of divided those two topics, but at least got us thinking about these cute little homes. Some of the things that I want to go over with you tonight are extended habitation, you know, seasonal or full-time. Is it on a foundation or is it on wheels? Is it an individual home, or is there a plan for maybe a tiny home neighborhood in the county? And if it's not camping, but it's on wheels, how does that fit? A little bit about nightly rentals versus secondary dwelling units and secondary dwelling units. So the first, foundation or wheels. If it's on a foundation, the county considers it a dwelling unit. There's no minimum size. It's treated just like a house. It's allowed everywhere. Again, we said no minimum size. That's under the zoning regulations. We actually used to have something, but we got rid of that probably 15, 18 years ago. 2002. Thanks for help. There's a large lot agreement that can be obtained if it's a parcel that's basically 105 acres or larger. You can have multiple units, you know, under the same agricultural forestry zoning. These units can be either primary or secondary. It really doesn't matter if your lot is eligible for a secondary dwelling unit. You would just have to meet the standards just like any other home. You know, just like for any other home, the approval process would include Todd and the building department, and again Scott, who couldn't be here tonight, the environmental health department. And I put, you know, the well permits issued by the state up here too, because that, especially out in the county, can be, you know, a big issue. I'm glad that Susie has a handout because what we're finding more recently, not necessarily new statutes, but the state is a little more diligent about enforcing them. Most of the county is over appropriated, so additional units on existing lots in the county, especially 35 or above, where you don't have water and sewer, can be difficult. Yes?
Quick question, definition of a foundation. Can I pull a tiny home on wheels onto a cement concrete pad and then anchor the tiny home to the concrete pad?
I'll tell you what, if we can save that to the end, I mean, mainly because that's more of a question for Todd.
Okay.
But yeah, we can get you an answer for that one, definitely. All right, so next, the other side. If it's on wheels, the county treats it basically as an RV trailer. We had, a couple years ago, had come up with our camping definition that needed some work. We had an issue come up in the county where we needed to revisit. And sort of at that time, we didn't have the interest that we have now. And just said, hey, if it's a tiny home, it's on wheels, it's camping, our camping regulations or our, RV or trailer park standards, would address those. And under camping, you can live in, your RV trailer, your tiny home, if you want to use it for that, for 60 cumulative days without a permit. There's also a 180-day permit process, but that still falls in under camping, So camping is, defined as a temporary recreational or leisure activity. The definition goes beyond that in the zoning regulations, but it's not the place you live. It's not the place where you commute to work. And when we came up with this, again, it was under the umbrella of camping and addressing what is camping. And it really wasn't part of the conversation that we included any kind of affordable or alternative housing. The focus was on camping. So any kind of extended habitation, seasonal, versus full-time or seasonal and full-time, already with the camping, already got that part covered. But basically, if it's a vacation home, as a tiny home is a vacation home, then it's the same as a house, and the planning, building, environmental health would treat it the same. Individual home or tiny home neighborhood. It seems like those are the two scenarios that are, that come up when, planning staff does get approached. And just a little bit about the county's master plan. The Routt County Master Plan, the foundation of the county's master plan is to preserve the western rural character of the county. And that's why when you drive out any of our towns, it gets rural really fast because the county doesn't do developments outside of our towns, our city, like most of the counties in the state. There's been a policy that's been in the master plan since 1980, our first master plan. 33A states that all new residential, commercial, or industrial developments have to be in a growth center, which basically Stagecoach fits into that definition also, but it's our 4 incorporated municipalities. So, a tiny home project that would involve a subdivision in the county outside of Stagecoach, chances are slim to none would be against the master plan. And again, treating tiny homes the same as regular homes. If it's on foundation, the master plan sees that the same as if it were a regular house. If it's on wheels, the master plan sees that the same as if it were, like an RV trailer. So then this newer issue that I've been, that's come up, new topic, for me anyway, well, if it's not camping, but it's on wheels, so basically on wheels for long-term occupancy, how do the existing zoning and subdivision regulations look at that? And the current regulations do not allow that. It really wasn't part of the conversations in the past. The good news is that the current regulations can be amended. And we do tweaks, modifications to the zoning regulations annually. And that's something that can come up. So basically, how do these amendments work? The community approaches, either the Board of County Commissioners directly through public comments or through me in my office, and we can even pass information along to the board or even schedule a discussion regarding tiny homes and amendments to our regulations with the Board of County Commissioners and see what they want to do to get started on that. Any changes to the regulations go through a public hearing process. So typically there's a series of community work sessions where we get the public out, exchange ideas. Those are with the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners. And then once we've got draft language in place, there's a recommendation by the Planning Commission for the Board of County Commissioners to adopt any new language. So some of these ideas, if there are any modifications, maybe a new land use category for a mobile dwelling or semi-permanent dwelling, whatever name we choose, even tiny home on wheels. Would different standards apply to that would make it different than a house? Some of the same things that we would, expect for a house, like number of parking spaces, snow storage, that kind of thing might have to be taken into consideration, and should be. And then when it comes to things like, hookups, water, sewer, electrical, is it off-grid? Most of that stuff is either taken care of through building department or the environmental health department. Another thing that the board might consider if they're approached is, should there be a permit for tiny homes on wheels for long-term occupancy, or use by right like a house? I could definitely see coming up with those standards. One of the good things about having a permit is when you get your permit, you've got the list of standards in hand instead of referring to the zoning regulations or giving me a call. And then, in my opinion, I think that the bigger issues include conformance with, building code, Scott's, department and Todd's department. Because if the Board of County Commissioners decides that, hey, we want to expand the zoning regulations to allow for tiny homes on wheels for long-term occupancy, I think it's a quick fix in zoning. So just a little bit about nightly rentals or secondary dwelling units. Just one slide on that, because if that's the plan where you would like a secondary dwelling unit to be used as a nightly rental, I've seen a couple of those in the county already, or to be used just as a secondary dwelling unit. For first, nightly rentals are not allowed in the county. We know they're out there. Occasionally we'll get complaints, gotta shut them down. But that is being reviewed right now by the Planning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners. Should the county have a process, a permit process for allowing secondary dwelling units like the city does? And this is the second round. The first time the Planning Commission said no, and the board wanted another round of discussion. So we're working on that right now. Secondary dwelling units. In some situations, some zone districts, they are allowed. The Board of County Commissioners just last year expanded the regulations that basically opened up more lots in the county to a secondary dwelling unit, and that conversation isn't done now either, because that was mainly just out in the country in our agricultural zone district, and the board might consider whether or not they want to have a secondary dwelling unit apply to our subdivisions with pipes, Steamboat 2 Metro District, Treehouse, Stagecoach, that kind of stuff. So basically, to get moving, and I'm glad to see so many people here, that the community really needs to reach out to the county. Like I said, either through my office or directly with the Board of County Commissioners. If I've said something that you feel too confined, again, secondary dwelling or tiny homes on wheels, there's room to move there. But we need to hear from the community to get things rolling. So that's the last of my slides. Thanks a lot, and look forward to your questions later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Todd, you're up. Just Darren.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Todd Carr with the Building Department. I'd like to thank everyone for making it out tonight. This is a great crowd, and I appreciate you having me as well, Sarah and Susie. Also, I'd like to introduce Ted Allen. He raised his hand. Ted's with the Building Department for a long time. He's our plan review examiner and assistant building official. Tonight, we're going to talk about the 2015 Building Code adoption and what the Building Department did in Routt County. It's brought in Appendix Q out of the 2018 International Residential Code to be part of this code adoption. The bottom is just a picture of a tiny home that actually is sitting on a foundation. Overview, tonight we're going to cover building permitting, the flow chart, tiny houses, Appendix Q, some definitions, size and space requirements within the home, stairs, ladder, lofts, and guards associated with those, as well as handrails, emergency escape openings, and manufactured, factory-built tiny home requirements, and energy code and foundation options with these homes. This is a kind of a building permitting flow chart just to kind of put this together where we sit today. So at the top left, if the tiny home is going to be built on a foundation, the answer is yes, you'd go down, and that would be reviewed and designed in accordance with the 2015 IRC code adoption, along with this Appendix Q. And then it would be permitted and inspected by Routt County Building Department. If the answer was no, and the tiny house may have been approved either because it was a manufactured or factory built home, and that person got their product approved through the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, which is the Division of Housing, that answer would be yes, then we again could help and permit that project. It'd be designed and approved according to the Manufactured Homes and Factory Built Housing booklet that we follow in the building department. And we have currently 3 staff members that are certified to do inspections on those type of homes. Then it would be permitted and inspected by Routt County. If you go back up to the top, the answer is no, and we got a tiny house that's built not in accordance with the 2015 International Residential Code or with the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, then that's where Routt County Building Department right now would not be involved in the permitting process for that structure. So kind of go back to your question about tiny home on wheels right now. We don't have anything right now to validate us to get involved and offer that permit. Your question about wheels on a foundation that was permanent and somehow fastened, could we entertain that idea? Absolutely. It would take a submittal potentially from an engineer showing proof of how that foundation, the slab was constructed, the type of tiny home that's getting put there, how it's going to get fastened, and relate back probably to how that was built, the tiny home, the frame system, and how it bolts, fastens to this permanent foundation. But right now we don't have anything from the state that's approved for such an application like that. Building Code Appendix Q, tiny homes. What is Appendix Q? Appendix Q is applicable to tiny houses used as single dwelling units. Tiny houses shall comply with the International Residential Code except otherwise what's stated in Appendix Q. So I just kind of want to point that out. So Appendix Q is we'll go through it here, but everything else with the home would be through our other international codes. So the International Mechanical Code, International Plumbing Code, National Electrical Code, and the International Residential Code. Some of the big questions is how big can my tiny home be? In unincorporated Routt County, the resolution was approved for 400 square feet. City of Steamboat Springs ordinance was 400 square feet. Mary Ellis at the town of Oak Creek upped that up to 500 square feet down there. And town of Yampa is to be determined yet, but I believe Janet wants to mirror what Mary Ellis has done. And so I think they're going to go with 500 square feet as well. Definitions and terms used: egress, roof, access window. It's basically a skylight or roof window designed and installed to satisfy the requirements of emergency escape and rescue. Landing platform, a landing measuring 2 treads deep and 2 risers tall, provided at the top of the step of the stairway accessing a loft. And then the definition of a loft in a tiny home is any floor level located above the main floor, open to it on at least one side, with the ceiling height less than 6 foot 8 inches, and complying with the area access and guard requirements. I'd like to point out down at the bottom, kind of the tiny house. So your 400 square feet is judged by your main floor plan and does not, it excludes the lofts. So your loft square footage is above and beyond that. So it kind of helps get a little bit more room in the house. So we'll step into minimum ceiling height requirements. So habitable spaces, hallways, and tiny homes should have a ceiling height of not less than 6 foot 8 inches. Bathrooms, toilet rooms, and kitchens shall have a ceiling height of not less than 6 foot 4 inches. And no obstructions should extend below those. So like if you had a duct work, a beam, whatever, they're not allowed to extend below that 6 foot 4 mark. What are some other minimum room dimensions? So what happens is you revert back to the regular International Residential Building Code. So habitable rooms shall have a floor area of not less than 70 square feet, except in your kitchens. Habitable rooms shall not be less than 7 feet in any direction, so width, length. Kitchens are defined as a dwelling unit needs a kitchen area, and it shall be provided with a sink. So it's really kind of open for interpretation as far as the size of your kitchen in a tiny home. Bathrooms revert back to the minimum sizing requirements and clearances per section R3071. It's pretty standard, so if you're looking at your toilet, you took the center line of it, you need 15 inches to the right, 15 inches to the left, and then if you're in front of it, you need 21 inches clear to the wall. So typically, I think the smallest bathrooms we see in residential are about 5 feet wide. That pretty much will meet those requirements. The length is to be determined based on your lavatory, your sink, your width, and stuff like that, and then the size of your shower. So shower dimensions right now are minimum are 30 by 30 with a 24-inch clearance in front of the shower. Lavatory must have at least 21 inches clearance in front of that as well. Here's kind of a small example of a floor plan of a tiny home. So the top picture shows the main level. You can see it's the open area in the middle. Down in the bottom picture shows the upper areas, the 2 lofts. How are lofts designed? So minimum loft area. Lofts can be used as sleeping or living space and shall meet the dimensions below. So lofts need to have a floor area of not less than 35 square feet. Lofts shall be not less than 5 feet in any horizontal direction. Portions of a loft with a sloping ceiling, so if you had a loft and you had a roof framed like this, measuring less than 3 feet from the finished floor to the finished ceiling will not be considered to be contributing to the minimum required area of that loft. So you'd have to kind of draw that plumb line up to your roof and figure that out. Under the gable roofs with a minimum slope of a 6/12, portions of a loft with a sloping ceiling measuring less than 16 inches from the finished floor to the finished ceiling shall not be considered as contributing to the minimum required area. That's kind of a picture at the bottom of a loft area. So the access and the primary egress from a loft shall be determined by the sections below. So stairways accessing lofts shall comply with the width requirements here. Should be not less than 17 inches in clear width at all points and above the permitted handrail height. The minimum width below the handrail should not be less than 20 inches. Headroom clearance in stairways accessing the loft should not be less than 6'2" inches. That's measured vertically from the edge of your stair tread plumb up is how they measure that, connecting to the tread nosings. The headroom for landing platform should not be less than 4'6" inches if you have a landing platform. Treads and risers. Risers for stairs accessing a loft shall be a minimum of 7 inches and a maximum of 12 inches. Tread depth and riser height should be calculated by the formula below. So it's tread depth equal to 20 inches minus 4/3 riser height, or the other formula below with the riser height equaling 15 inches minus 3/4 inch tread depth. There is an exception on landing platforms, shall measure 2 treads deep and 2 risers tall. Handrail and guardrail design requirements basically get pulled in from the International Residential Building Code. They're going to be required on one side of stairs when you have 4 or more risers. Guards on open sides of stairways need to comply with the code as well. So if you got a vertical distance of 30 inches or greater from a landing, a walking surface, platform, or stair, you need to meet the guardrail requirements, which are actually the same as any other residential dwelling. What about building a ladder to avoid, saving space to get up to your loft? So that's what most people do, I think, at least my research on the tiny home. So ladders can be provided and are allowed accessing the lofts. Ladders accessing lofts shall have 12-inch minimum run width, 10-inch to 14-inch spacing between the runs. Ladders should be capable of supporting 200-pound load on any run. Spacing should be uniform within 3/8 of an inch. The ladder should be installed with a 70 to 80 degree incline from horizontal. You also have alternating tread devices or ship ladders as alternatives as well. Those specifications will comply with the normal section of the IRC. Clear width and below the handrails will be not less than 20 inches. And ship ladders accessing lofts will comply with also the IRC. How do I not fall out of your loft? So, a little humor there. It kind of takes me back to as a kid when my mom would put those little rails up when we were really young on the bunk beds to keep us in there. But anyway, so guards are required up there. Loft guards should be located along the open side of any loft located more than 30 inches vertically above the main floor. Loft guards should not be less than 36 inches in height or 1/2 the clear height to the ceiling. So if you only have a 48-inch height because of a slope or something, so you take 1/2 of that, that would be your guardrail. So here's just some pictures of different, you got the staircase built here on the left, and then a ladder on the right, both accessing the loft. Some pretty clever storage built into that as well. With emergency escape and rescue openings with tiny houses, it's essentially you need to meet the same size requirements as you would with a normal single-family dwelling. So that's 5.7 square feet of clear net opening. You're allowed to have that if you were up in your loft, you had a flat ceiling, pitched ceiling, whatever it might be, you can put a window in your roof that would open. So that would be a little bit of an advantage for these tiny homes. The minimum is 20 inches wide by 20, and that's the width, and the minimum height is 24 inches in height. So there's a picture of a tiny home with an egress window built in. So now just kind of jump back to manufactured homes and factory built housing approved by HUD or the Colorado Department of Local Affairs Housing Division. So right now we have a booklet that I did bring. I don't have it in the presentation, but basically factory built homes, manufactured homes are certified through the state, or they're going to be certified through HUD. And what we look for as inspectors and during the plan review is that this data card stamp that is approved, that somebody has approved the design of either the manufacturer or factory built home that's going to be brought out and put on site. And typically with those drawings, they'll give you the exact location of where your bearing points are, what you need underneath that home as far as the foundation or piers to support that. Why is that important? Because it ensures that the home is constructed in accordance with local climate and zoning climate zone requirements, snow, wind, seismic, footing depth, tie downs of how you get this thing fastened to the foundation. There's oversight at factory built homes for quality and life safety issues. Installation of the manufactured factory built home is done by a licensed installer approved by the state. And that's something else we look for as inspectors. So when we go out on site and they're setting the home, it has to be done by a state licensed contractor that's been approved. And we need to see that paperwork from them as well upon our inspection. And then it meets the code requirements per the Division of Housing. This is just a quick checklist of the 2015 International Energy Code that will be adopted January 1st. So even though you're in a tiny home, you still need to meet all the requirements of the Energy Code. I would kind of second what Sarah and Susie have been saying. I mean, these tiny homes are great because I think they're going to be really tight, efficient, low on energy bills. I think it's a great concept. So here's some examples of how you could potentially have a foundation under your tiny home. The top one is an incorrect insulation technique, and the bottom four show your options of that. As I kind of was thinking through this tonight, of course we don't have a lot of tiny homes yet, and I think we have a lot of advocates for people that want to remain, keep these on wheels and find a way to get a permit, which is great. But one of the things is lack of storage with the tiny home. I think that's got to run through everybody's mind. We all have bikes and things that we're going to want to store. So if you didn't have a detached structure, I think a clever way to do this possibly would be build some sort of a crawl space underneath your home potentially. And that doesn't count towards your square footage because it's non-occupiable. And maybe you could do a little opening in that crawl space if it was on condition. You would then have some storage to slide under your tiny home on certain sides or something like that. So there could be some advantages to that. Take any questions anyone might have.
Several tiny home manufacturers offer expandable tiny homes where you can buy 400 square feet under the definition, but a year or two later you can have a bedroom, you can add something to the home, and the home is constructed to do that.
Okay.
And now you're going from 400 to 600 to 800 to 1,200 square feet. How do you think the code or the laws would address something like that, where if I bought a tiny home and it had 400 square feet and I'm under the code requirements, the next year I'm going to expand it to 800 square feet? Would I fall out of the definition of tiny homes, or would you change the definition?
I think you're pre-existing. I'd look at your existing home that you permitted the year before or 2 years as a tiny home, and you've come in with additional plans to add an addition onto that. That addition would not be able to utilize Appendix Q. It's kind of how I look at that. So we view the addition under the IRC, the regular International Residential Building Code, and take that apart from your tiny home. Does that sound? Yeah.
If you need to meet minimum requirements for square footage, basement's kind of
For what's that?
Can I just build a huge basement and then put a tiny home on top of that foundation to meet minimum requirements? So if you gotta build at least 1,200 or 1,600, and I have 800 of my square feet in a basement.
Anything that would be considered occupiable, habitable space, like a full basement, would count towards that 400.
No, I'm saying if I have to meet for subdivisions, like in here, you have to be at least 1,200 or 1,600.
You would be viewed upon as a regular single-family dwelling, not a tiny home. Once you exceed over 400 square feet, unless you're in, one of the other towns that have elected to increase that to 500.
So that will work?
No, it wouldn't. You could not build under Appendix Q if you exceed the square footage.
I think he said that could he build a big basement and then have a tiny house on wheels or something else going on top, and as long as the basement and it together met the square footage requirements, would that work?
Exactly.
Like if it was 1,600, was your minimum?
If there was a minimum requirement?
Right, so for the subdivision.
Oh, for
That's
the
the HOA or the planning and zoning.
I think that's going to vary a lot depending on the development.
Yeah.
If there are design review requirements, design review guidelines, that's going to really be kind of a moving target depending on where you're looking.
Kind of view that as like 2 dwelling units.
If you have a cinder block foundation and you leave out 2 cinder blocks, theoretically you could just like put in a forklift whenever you want to move it. Put it up, pull it to somewhere wherever you're going, let's say you're moving to, and then you got this finished basement with walls already there.
I'd view that as like 2 dwelling units, almost back to the last question. You'd have a single family dwelling that you built one way, and you have a tiny home that came through a different permit.
So, Todd, I want to make sure we get everybody talking, and I think we're going to do some good discussion.
All right,
so.
thanks.
Guys, you ready?
Sure.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Todd. Really great setup, and thanks for kind of helping direct us as people are interested in tiny homes and really defining what we have to do and where we can do it. Super helpful. Thank you, Yampa Valley Sustainability Council, for having us. My name is Ryan Cox.
I'm Darren Fryer. How are you?
And we are owners of a new company that we've just started called Smart Pads, and we are also realtors at Steamboat Sotheby's.
We started Smart Pads. I've been involved in the movement of tiny homes for a couple of years, been in some of the exposés with Chad and some other people, and there's been a lot of momentum in terms of conversation, but there really hasn't been a lot of actual things happening. So we're trying to make actual things happen, which what we started Smart Pads was we went out and sourced what we thought was the best manufacturer, and we branded it with our name, but we've negotiated some wholesale rates and sort of provided a volume that we believe we can sustain for our area. And one of the products is tiny homes, but it's a prefabricated home company, but the tiny homes is one of the products. So we'll speak specifically about that, but that's the tiny homes are the ones that are fully done, prepared, brought in, put on a foundation. That's what we will be able to share with you. We have other products which are fully available with architects to put together prefabs of different size. The aim is, as being realtors, been doing in town here for more than 13 years, we've got back to that point again where building is just excessively expensive, and we see people leave town. They just can't find a place to put their head down in, maybe not a condominium, but something of a reasonable price. So we're aiming to fill that niche. It's a new company. We're learning a lot. We've been out to the facility that we're producing them. And the trick is to get them at the right price is not to build them here in Steamboat, number one. But I believe individuals could build them, but on a sustainable level, that would be an interesting question if they could. We're dealing with places that people get paid $12 to $18 an hour, where a start price here is $25 for a skilled person, and we're talking equally skilled, just in a smaller towns. So Ryan's going to go through a few of the items. I'll jump in here and there on some of the products that we've been asked to talk about in terms of financing and a few things like that.
So before we really dive into the meat of tiny homes, we'll dig in a little bit on what Darren was alluding to with the market here in Route County. But first, looking at the national market, Susie hit on the average square footage of a single family home, which is about 2,600 square feet. And interesting way to think about that is that the tiny homes that we're discussing right now, 400 square feet, represent just 15% of that average. So clearly there are a lot of people who are living more efficiently and are looking for something that's more efficient, which is why we're all here. The average price on a residence across all categories in the U.S. is $385,000. Maybe you saw the answer, maybe you didn't. Who can guess what the average price here in Route County is, or what it was in 2016? Any guesses? Across all categories.
I won't guess, because I know. Let someone else, it's not really for saying, yes. $500,000.
Any guesses?
415.
$500,000.
415, $500,000.
Million.
All right, we're getting some bookends. That's good.
We didn't bring any prizes, unfortunately, for the right person.
Getting close. So the average price here in Route County across all categories, so that's going to be condos, townhomes, duplex, single family, is $642K. So when you think about that compared to the national average at $385K, there's a big disparity. We live in a desirable place. A lot of people want to be here, and that's reflected in our real estate values. The median sales price is $446K, so that's effectively the midpoint. So we have a lot of high-end, high dollar value properties lifting up that average sales price to the $642. Just some market trends. 2017 versus 2016 year over year shows a 6% increase in average sales price and a 14.4% increase in median sales price. So we're seeing some pretty significant growth in our real estate valuation. We're also seeing growth from a population standpoint. We have a lot more full-time and part-time people moving to town, so there's a lot of demand for limited supply. There's a lot of new construction that's primarily focused right now in the higher end arena and not so much in the smaller, more efficient footprints. And then when you look at construction costs, are there any builders here? Okay, look, we're hearing 7 to 10% increases year over year, building season over building season in construction costs. So, as Darren alluded to, part of the advantage of outsourcing is that we can keep our costs down and bring in an affordable product. So clearly all this leads to a legitimate, real concern with housing here in the Valley. And if you guys are reading the newspaper at all, you know that, gosh, in the last 3 weeks, I think we've had these 3 articles. So reaching a tipping point. Recent reporting on the scarcity of single-family homes in the city of Steamboat Springs, priced in the 400,000 and 500,000 ranges, suggests to us that the dream of working families building a single-family home here is fading, and the typical mountain resort town pattern of down valley growth may soon settle in. The American dream, is it still alive in Steamboat Springs? Is 2017 the year that Steamboat restored down valley growth for good? And then whether you're looking to own or rent, it's a challenge. Looking to rent a room for under $700 a month in Steamboat, good luck. Workers moving to Steamboat Springs for the upcoming ski season again face high rents and even tighter living quarters.
And so that, obviously you just heard about the referendum 5A, so there is some potential we're going to have some help. We've got the community behind on 5A. We met with Jason, who put that whole project together and got it successfully voted in. He's going to have $900,000 to spend, so there's going to be some more inventory, but the reality is this takes years to put together, and it's all going to be focused on, for the most part, condominiums. We spoke to him about us doing some tiny homes and subdivisions, and he is open and willing for any partners who want to come together and put together a tiny home subdivision, and in terms of helping them out financially. So part of that money is not 100% slated, but he's open to using some of that money towards tiny homes. So there is some potential hope. We were speaking about what we can do to help bring product, and really what it comes down to is maybe the city nominating a piece of land, or a developer, someone bringing it, and then you're getting with the planning department, them improving a tiny home development. So there is potential coming to the city, but the reality as things stand at the moment, the metrics really don't work in the city with a basic lot price. A starting lot price, I think, is $250,000, wasn't it? We looked at
here in Steamboat.
In Steamboat, that's the cheapest lot in town. So you look at a tiny home for $70,000 to $100,000. There's definitely an upside down situation there. So that's one of the challenges as well. So possibly through this there could be some opportunity. It's going to take a number of people coming together to make that happen.
So we know we need some more creative solutions, and obviously that's why we're all here tonight. So we want to talk a little bit more about smart pads and what our mission is. So we have partnered with builders in Utah and Idaho to bring prefab product to the valley. And a portion of the product that we're offering is tiny homes. We have 4 models that will show you some elevations up here momentarily. Our mission is to make new construction more attainable and desirable by providing stylish, efficient, affordable prefab home solutions.
That's 4 of the models that we've got at the moment. These can be changed. We've got our own in-house architect, which can mix up all sorts of different angles, roof lines, decks, window types, finished materials like the steel. I'm working with some people at the moment doing high-end homes, and some of these materials are the same kind of materials that you can put on your tiny home. They don't have to look like some people's concept of a trailer. They can look super high-class, stylish, and of course you've seen some of the designs. The spaces are incredibly efficient. One of the ones that we're in Idaho. It really, because of the volume of space, it really lived a whole lot bigger than 400 square feet. So this is 4 examples of what we have available. They're about 8 weeks from the time that you put down your deposit, 10 weeks latest. They need to go on, we're not in the side of the ones on wheels. We're about what we call real property, not personal property. Personal property would be on wheels. Real property is one of these that are designed specifically to the standards, and we've been dealing with these guys on making sure that they meet the standards of our county. And they go onto a foundation and they become a real home. And they can be financed like a real home, and essentially all the plumbing and everything comes and meets the exact spot, and it's all synced together, and you can have one of these homes up and running in 10 weeks. Yes. Hello?
What is the land restrictions on these homes?
So some of the ones that were going through before, the reality is we filtered it down. There's a lot of covenants on subdivisions that have minimum square footage, so it instantly takes out a huge amount of lots. And so we, therefore, focusing our side of things on the 800 square foot ones, which is Hayden's minimum square foot. You can put them on in Steamboat Springs, any size you want, but the reality is there's an economic situation, downtown lot of $300,000 and a $100,000 home. If someone has enough money and wants to live in a small home like that and doesn't need finance from a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, because that wouldn't meet their standards, then sure. But you could do it with a local bank, but it would meet their standards, and they'd be happy to finance if you chose to do it. So there's land pockets everywhere where you can do it, and in unincorporated, outside of the city, then that's what these guys have been talking about tonight. So there's lots of places to put them. It's a matter of where does it make economic sense in a lot of circumstances. And so, for example, there are, lots, that it is difficult to find in terms, and that's one of the big challenges for the tiny homes. That's why a subdivision that's gone through a PUD process is the most likely opportunity for a lot of these homes. And that's coming back to that 5A and what can move forward. And none of it's short answers. But there are lots out there at the moment in the county that these can go on. Yes.
You say there's a lot of possibilities out there at the moment. Are there any PUDs going through planning opportunities out there at this moment?
We actually have an application in with Hayden, so it's not in unincorporated county. So there's one that I know of with one of these model tiny homes come together. So
I would say Oak Creek's working on one as well.
Okay, good to know. Excellent.
What's the status of the AMPA?
I haven't seen that move forward.
Now, you were talking earlier about the townhomes.
That's the one that we're just talking about then in Hayden, because they have an 800 square foot minimum. They actually had to come up with a design that put two together and reverse the interiors. And that's not approved. It's just an example of something that's in the works.
We'll finish the material and then we'll continue with the questions.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
I didn't want to jump in.
So as far as pricing, we've worked with our partner and we project that we can, any of these units, it's obviously going to vary based on finishes, but these would cost around $75,000 in case you're wondering. And another big piece of why we're here tonight to talk to you is, and what Susie was certainly interested in, is some of the benefits and then some financial assistance. So as far as benefits, many of the benefits for a tiny home and prefab include less waste, energy efficient, and just jump back to that less waste within a factory setting and pushing out and producing or scaling production of the same product, you are able to significantly reduce the waste in building each of these homes up to 80%. So that's a pretty impressive number, and when we're talking about sustainability, I think that's very important. Energy efficient, higher quality. So Darren and I were chatting about an interesting analogy in regards to building a home out in the elements versus building a home in a controlled environment.
Yeah, it was your concept, so you should say it. It was pretty. I liked it. The builder may not like the concept so much, but it really rung true based on our seeing the fact basically is a football field these homes get built on, and they move from one spot with a high efficiency crew, which is building the structural foundation part, to the highest standards because they have to come out on trucks. So they have to be amazingly perfect to go from the trucks, withstand traveling a couple thousand miles, and then going perfectly on a foundation. So the environments, I mean, the squareness and the tightness of everything is really, and I see a lot of construction, I walk around it all the time, is just amazing. And so it moves from one spot along the football field, and there's a crew on each day that does their job, and they do it with a supervisor watching everything all the way through. And compare it to, you know, we've got some great quality builders, but that comes at a high cost here in Steamboat, and they might check on a project for an hour a day and manage their subs and things like that. But we saw a really controlled environment. They can also do, from an efficiency point of view, an inch of spray foam for about $1,800 in one of these tiny homes. And if you know, a house, most houses here are about $30,000+ to much bigger, but to get that kind of efficiency level with the closed cell foam. And so you can put that kind of foam inside one of these, they actually almost don't breathe very well at all. They hold their heat in to the point you may actually need to have an air exchange system in them. So we were very impressed about it. You can say that your concept on how that worked.
The analogy was, you know, I think when we're talking about prefab or manufactured homes, oftentimes there's a stigma that comes with that, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because if you think about your car, for example, your Subaru, and you think about your Mercedes, and you think about the sleet and the snow and the sun and the freezing and the thawing that happens here in Steamboat, would you want your car to be built out exposed to those elements? And I think pretty much everybody would say no. So this is no different. We're talking about a home, the most important purchase for, you know, in many people's lives, and the most significant financial commitment. So it makes sense that, you know, we would be building these in a controlled environment where there is a high level of process and protocol to ensure consistent, high quality product. So just kind of an interesting way to think about it.
Probably one of the last things that we wanted us to talk about was one of the biggest challenges I've seen as a realtor for years, and it's more exacerbated now, is that people come and like, hey, I've got $15,000 down and I really want to build my own tiny home and put it on a place, or build a prefab and do this. And the reality is most people don't have the amount of money to build their own houses. And it's not to do with anything other than the banks. The bank's not going to lend to someone. Assume we gave an example before. Let's just say it was a $25,000 lot, $75,000 tiny home, and $50,000 worth of building fees, infrastructure. You put your slab or your stem wall down, and approvals and everything. So you're at $150,000. The reality is the bank's going to want to see at least $30,000. 20% is always the minimum. And so we've come up with a plan for down payment assistance, and that's some private money who helps provide the extra $15,000 down, up to 10%. That once it's constructed and completed, and Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac finances that, and it's a takeout, whether it's a local bank, they get their money back and a little return for doing it. So part of the plan here is to help people get into the homes without there. So that's a community and you know, the bank, Yamba Valley Bank, working together to really stretch the rules a little bit. So that was how that program works. If anyone wants more information about it, come and ask us later on.
And that's about it. You can check out our website, smartpads.co, not .com, .co. And we'll be here to answer any questions that you guys have with Chad and Tom.
Thanks.
Thanks.
So we got about 20 minutes for questions. Who's got a burning question? There's a burning question right there. Get it first.
What is the occupancy maximum? 400 square feet. As far as how many people can live in it.
Let's bring Michael up too.
Who's best equipped to answer?
Well, I'll give the zoning response. And that is basically the definition of family is set by the Supreme Court, and so it really doesn't relate to the size of the structure. And I don't know if Todd has an occupancy issue, but there's not one.
It'd be following the International Residential Code, but in most cases, if it's a family, we follow the zoning requirements.
So you could have a family of 8 in 400 square feet.
No, what would it be? What is
Because I thought
the
it was like 2 per bedroom.
200 square feet, right, per occupant?
Yeah, I mean, that's the occupant level.
Yeah.
So
But
2 people, max.
2 people per 200 square feet?
That's how they're figuring it now.
That's how it's figured.
That's how it's figured. It's not-
Because they didn't address that in Appendix Q, so it would revert back to the regular building code.
Which is, what is
200 square feet per person for residential. It doesn't drop until you get into like your commercial codes and dormitories.
So what you're looking at is 2 people in a 400.
Now, how would we view the loft? 'Cause that would be, they don't count it towards the 400 square feet, but could we could potentially utilize that as additional square footage. So if you had 400 square feet on your main floor and you had 2 lofts or whatever you have up there, that square footage on the loft, I think, could be utilized.
But chances are, to get 200 additional square feet in a lot, that's pretty tricky.
Nah, it'd be like,
half the area.
yeah, depends on the,
Yeah.
I guess if you had the size, but.
Michael, do you have any insights on that from what you're
Well, I first of all, I want to say, you guys, this is awesome. This is fantastic that we got planning, building, you guys here doing this. I mean, I got started kind of working with this tiny house thing because of an interest from DOLA coming last year, and it piqued my interest, and I'm like, dang, you know, a lot of people know me, I'm an interior designer in town, but this is that creative side of building something cool and all these little nooks and crannies. But as I got deeper into it, the American Tiny House Association .org, you can go look at it. It was kind of where I wanted to find out what the heck was going on with this. And so I kind of got pulled into this more and more and more. And so now I'm the regional director for Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado, and Illinois, and Missouri. And it's kind of a lot. And to see that you guys are all here, as excited as it is for this town, I'm just really, we're on the cutting edge of communities. And one thing that's going to happen is that we can talk about details in Appendix Q, and you guys can have little individual questions about that. But the bottom line that we're doing at American Tiny House Association is advocacy. We're trying to say, listen, it takes a community to change the codes. Everything you heard about, all these things that they're talking about that are building department codes, levy and all we got to do is, as a community, get together and say, hey, let's change it. Okay, that's the bottom line. We have the power to change it. We live in a democracy. And with that power, we can go and ask, like Chad, fantastic, man. He's like, guys, bring me a project. He's begging for you to bring him a project, to ask him to change the code. Okay? When you have planning committees, planning departments ask you to that, begging you to do that, okay? So if you have developed, now what's happening, just a little longer, what's happening is you have a lot of people that own land. I got 2 acres. I was at the Colorado Tiny House Festival in Keensburg, and I spoke there, and there were some people that kept coming to me and say, Mike, we just live, 20 miles away, and we have 2 acres. How do I get a tiny home neighborhood on this? Okay, and listen, Chad will tell you, there's avenues, a PUD, different things you got to do, follow the codes. The domino that fell starts January in Routt County, and that domino effect is Appendix Q. So now the building department has the rule book to come look at your tiny home and say, you can build that, we have a rule book to inspect it. Now the debate is still out, even with the American Tiny House Association, whether it's wheels, foundations, or both, or both. That's still out for debate, but from a building department standpoint and a sustainability of an industry, we're not talking a casual thing, we're talking an industry, okay? This sustainability industry starts with Appendix Q. Because now it's not a camping trailer that looks really cool. Because that's what it is. On wheels, it's a camping trailer. Don't try to fool yourself. Don't try to convince anything else. It's a camping trailer. It's an RV. Okay? Once you have Appendix Q, domino fell, now we have all these reasons to come up and say, I got a rule book, I can inspect it, I can change some zoning. So we as a community need to say, okay, great, let's do it. Okay, so that's kind of where we need to go with this.
And I just wanted to add on to what Michael was saying, in that we did put a sheet out there. If you are interested in helping to move this forward, please sign up. I know there were 2 sheets. If you by mistake put your name on one versus the other, there's one to get on our listserv and one to be part of the working group. Go ahead and put if you're signed up for the listserv and you want to be on the working group, put WG on that, and we'll reach out to you and come up with a meeting time and start that ball rolling. So thank you, Michael. And I also, sorry, one quick thing. So Scott Kalman is sick. He's environmental health, so he couldn't be here. And he also, just to echo that, which is there is permitting that is required. There are some hoops that we'd have to jump through from the environmental health side, wastewater and wastewater. But he said, you know, again, they are here to serve the community, and so if we can work on it, he is willing to help us through that process. So
that's it right there.
And from Water Resources, just to let you know, if there's an existing well on the parcel of land on which you are putting the house and the permit is for domestic use in up to 3 single-family dwellings, and there's only 1 dwelling, then another house can be hooked up to that well. Much more legalese. We got a question back here?
Yes. But you know you're always so eloquent. In 1995, I developed a project called Walton Townhomes. It was a modular project. Our goal was to bring all the units in under $100,000. Because we're a home rule community, and we had stamped approved plans from the state for the product that we were bringing from Kansas, we got the product here. We were setting it about this time in 1995 with the wind howling, a crane, the boxes swinging in the air. And after we got it all knitted together, and I'm going to pick on the building department just a little bit, but I want you to defend yourself. We had inspections after the product was set, and because of home rule, they were able to change a lot of the things that were stamped and approved on the state plans. And it cost us about $25,000 a unit, which we had to pass on to the consumer. Even at that, we were able to offer a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, 1,300 square foot townhome for $120,000. Couldn't even begin to do that today. But what is to prevent the home rule from acting again to change what might be on approved plans from the state? Does this Appendix Q do that?
You have to go back. I mean, I'd have to research what your project was. If it was approved through the Colorado Division of Housing back then. I don't know what was going on here in Route County in '95. I can only voice is what happens today. I mean, if your project's approved, as I mentioned, through the Colorado Division of Housing, then we would only be reviewing and inspecting your foundation that house was to sit on. Everything else is primarily done at the state level, minus the electrical, plumbing, and gas hookups to the structure. And then we would look for that data stamp card that I showed, and then the installation paperwork done by the licensed professional.
That is one of the reasons, by the way, that a lot of developers haven't jumped in on the affordable housing, because of that very situation with home rule. I'm happy to say that I live 440 square.
Questions? Question here?
Yeah, I was just going to add, so just to clarify, any house on wheels then that is not prefab, it doesn't have any regulations necessarily as to how it's built at the moment?
It's treated like an RV.
Just an
As only like an RV.
But if you want to get your house certified, there is the NOAA association. You know, if you want to go with that.
Yeah, NOAA started, and these guys, they're out there trying to develop, before the Appendix Q came out, they wanted to have some kind of building standard, and mainly so they can get insurance on it, because you can't get insurance on your tiny home. And so there's a couple of insurance companies nationwide that allow you to insure a tiny home on wheels as long as it's built to this NOAA standard. And so that's kind of been the caveat right now up until the Appendix Q takes into effect. And I got one more thing. The Appendix Q, guys, we wouldn't really be having this conversation if our city officials didn't already approve Appendix Q. there's municipalities all over the state, all over the United States, and that's kind of what our advocacy is to try to get and help every little community adopt the Appendix Q, because then it opens the doors for people to build it to those standards. And NOAA was doing it beforehand, but now it's got rule book for building departments all over the country.
There's some questions in the back. Let's see it. There's a hand up. Back there in the back.
Yeah, this question is for Ryan and Darren. You were saying the number for your 400 square foot home is around 77,000.
Yep, that's just the home, not the land and not the stem wall and excavation utilities.
This foundation excavation.
Yeah, one of those models is exactly the price up there that you saw, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure which one. I know which one it is, but it was one of those ones up in the photographs. So we can show you later if you want.
If you missed the breakdown, the estimates that we've kind of been working off of, and we're going to be ordering one of these. We should have one of these here in January. So we'll keep everybody posted on that, where that can't be seen. But
that's 77,000.
77,000. We estimate that it's probably 50,000 in infrastructure costs. So that's, as Darren said, excavation, foundation, utilities connection. And if you're pulling in utilities from somewhere else, obviously that starts to become.
Is permitting for the county included in that 77,000?
No, the 50,000. We've done an estimate. I mean, you've got your permitting, stem wall, tap fees. We've bundled that and said about $50,000 for all those, and that's a lot of it's dependent on how big the lot is, where it is, how far away, what's the slope, what's the soils condition. It's just like everything, it has to have an engineered foundation, like some of those drawings that you did. And it can, on a flat lot that's got good soils, it's close to utilities, it can be reasonably inexpensive, but you get into more complicated situations with steeper lots and soils that aren't as structural.
So that's FOB, like pulls up, and then you have to hire the crane to put it on.
Yeah.
So you just pull it up to the site.
Pull it up to the site and it goes down exactly under the stem wall.
No, but we paid that 77,000 only delivered to the site.
Yep.
On a truck.
Yep.
And then the homeowner has to get the crane and.
We can organize all of that, but yeah, it's a separate component. And we have builders we can recommend who can, for a fee, can do that.
For in addition.
It's part of the, yeah, it's part of the 50,000 estimate. It's
and
all,
then the cost of the lot.
Yeah.
Over here, you're waving at me.
Right. No, I just was wondering, the community that's being proposed to be, is there going to be a lot rent or some sort of community, HOA fee?
It all to be determined. It's really based on the city's final determination of what they will allow. So it's only had a pre-application at the moment, and it's about to go in for full submittal in the next month.
But your vision is to have any kind of like community aspects to it, or?
Just want to do something cool that it allows some really nice looking homes at a square footage. We don't know if we're able to sell them yet, and if they're going to be compatible with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. There's a lot of investigation that needs to be done there. So at minimum, there'll be a rental product. At best, it'll be a resale product, but that's it really comes down to the approvals of what the town of Hayden approves.
Somebody go ahead and ask a question while you're here.
All right.
Jump in there, Catherine.
People, we do have, Seaboard Springs is a home rule city, and I think Hayden is Hayden voted home rule. Yes. But the county is not home rule. We went through that many years ago, couple meetings, and the county voted against it. But for your county planning, correct?
Statutory.
And your county building, correct?
That's correct.
Well, region. Are you doing the city building?
We provide the building services to the city, as we do the town of Oak Creek and Yep as well.
I just wanted to make sure we were commingling the terms.
I spoke to the town manager in Hayden today, and they're going to be looking at their land use codes next year, and they're considering adopting Appendix Q as well. So next year, by that time, it might be Appendix V. So, what other questions do we have?
Just a comment.
Oh, okay.
Check to make sure, though. I'd be really surprised if the Department of Housing, Division of Housing has adopted Appendix Q.
It's one city at a time.
They're on
right
the
now, till the
12
state picks it up.
version, right? Yeah, I tried to call them today, actually.
Okay, give us an update later, Todd.
Yeah.
Who else? Did you?
The house that you guys are bringing in, where's your plan to put it? Is it gonna be, is it for people to walk through it and kind of like a little model for your
Exactly. Yeah,
business?
it's a model. It will stay on a trailer chassis so that we have the ability to move it. And we will likely be hosting a few events where I think it can stay in one place for up to 2 weeks. So that's the plan, and we will announce, hopefully with the help of the paper, we'll advertise, we'll let people know where that can be seen.
You're gonna run it out. Only 60 days.
Christmas party.
Right here in the gray coat. So currently, and then subsequently after the 2015 IRC adoption, how is the county and city handling a situation like, let's say I have a home and I have space on my lot in Steamboat proper for an ADU or a secondary unit. I want to do something that's under 400 square feet, so after January 1st, it'll be part of the tiny home situation. But how are you guys handling a situation like that where we want to hook into utilities, A, and it's an occupiable space, and then B, how is that handled if you want to do a totally independent off-grid house? Is that even permissible or allowed if you don't want to hook into utilities? Let's go with the scenario where you're adding an ADU on an existing property for maybe rental.
So a solar powered ADU.
Well, not just solar, but also totally off-grid.
So composting toilet and solar and.
Not in the city.
Not in the city, right.
And
You can't do it in the city, but.
And it's under 400 square feet. Are you guys in a position to even handle something like that? Yeah. Or like how would that get, like would it be permittable?
Under the community development code?
Well, under the IRC.
Yeah, no, there's actually quite a few secondary dwelling units, I think,
Yeah.
going on right now in Old Town area that I've been to recently that are, I mentioned to Ted, that are actually very close, just like a hair over. They're at 500, maybe 525 square feet. And as I'm out there, I'm mentioning that to the owners, hey, you know, that you could have met almost the requirements of this if you've taken a little off. But yeah, so I mean, I think we see a lot of those just over that 400 threshold right now, but absolutely come January 1st, there'd be no reason why you couldn't utilize that section.
It's the off the grid thing that.
But yeah, that is
has to
completely,
be
yeah,
utility.
you know, that you also need, you know, a viable water source.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
for-
so no.
Yeah,
The
right.
state of Colorado, you're not allowed to collect your own rainwater. It's illegal to collect rainwater.
Okay, guys, before you leave, if you're gonna sign up for the working group, I think we have time for one more question, and then will you guys be able to stay around for legal questions? I'll tackle them after, but we have one more burning question.
Water to rainwater.
Nope. Okay, well, thanks so much for coming, guys.